How's it going, everybody, and welcome to episode 327 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode, we're looking at the subject of how to create a wildflower meadow and I suppose the whole behind the scenes of what needs to be done to create a wildflower meadow in a public green space or within a housing estate or a community garden. So it's a listener's question, and yeah, there's lots of different avenues and things that we need to kind of consider when we're looking at it. But before we get into that, a message from this week's sponsor, which is Probio Carbon. And when it comes to growing strong, healthy vegetables, everything starts with the soil. We've talked about that so many times on the podcast before. And in the early spring, some of the best things that you can do to enrich your soil is to add Probio Carbon to it. So it combines the benefits of biochar, which we've spoke about before, and also contains Bacillus subtilis. So it's inoculated with Bacillus subtilis, which is a natural fungicide and plant growth promoter. And this gives you a substantial increase in the yield, makes them more resilient plants, more disease resistant, more drought resistant, and just creates healthier, more vibrant vegetables and crops. So whatever type of vegetables you're growing, invest in your soil this spring. You choose Probio Carbon. It's an enriched carbon feed, and you can find all details on www.probiocarbon.ie. So on the episode itself, it started off with a question on, somebody who's looking to create a wildflower meadow within a housing estate. And I suppose the what needs to happen, I suppose, is when you have or you're looking to create a wildflower meadow in a space like that, you have a number of factors, a number of kind of stakeholders who would be involved or would be, um, I suppose, affected by the decisions that are taken, or feel they have, some input to have into that. So obviously, within an estate, you have all the various people who are living there. They all have to have their say. And then, of course, you have if there's a management company or somebody who's looking after the maintenance company who's looking after the area, there's, there's that element of it that needs to be discussed or so on. And there is also the question of what is a wildflower meadow? What is the purpose of this wildflower meadow? What are we looking to achieve from this wildflower meadow? And all of those things. And the listener said that some of the members of the group were, interested in getting wildflowers, and they were just going to buy the packets in their local discount store and sow it that way. So we really have to go back to the start here with this, and we need to explain and sort of navigate through this. So, firstly, anybody that's looking to create, an area like this in a public space, that's a good thing and should be acknowledged as a good thing. But it's important to be properly informed and properly, have all the proper information in order to achieve an end goal that is beneficial for everybody out of this. So I suppose the first thing you start with is, what is a wildflower meadow? And this person I know is coming at it from the point of view of supporting pollinators and looking at it from the aesthetics perspective and looking to be native. And so they're coming at it from that kind of an angle. And the person that said let's get the seeds in the local discounts, local discounter, they're looking at it purely from an aesthetic perspective and not looking for the long term. So essentially what you'll buy in your local discount store, sold sometimes as wildflowers and incorrectly so, is what really is a floral meadow. And a floral meadow is a series of, generally speaking, annual, but sometimes mixed with perennial seeds. And they can be, they're mixed to give you an aesthetic, which is, a nice look of flowers that will flower heavily in the summertime. They tend to be short-term mixes, so they're something that would need to be sowed. And depending on whether it's an annual mix, if it's an annual mix, it will need to be sowed every year. If it's an annual and perennial mix, they will definitely need to be sowed and re-sowed by year two. And that's a floral meadow. It can contain things like, cosmos, cornflowers, poppies, Achilles, calendulas, things like that. So and they can be very, very beautiful, and they can be beneficial to pollinators. So it is, that is something that is worth and does have benefit. But you do need to understand that that is a floral meadow. It's a short-term meadow as opposed to a longer-term meadow. The other thing, which is a true native meadow, in this case in Ireland, a true native Irish meadow, with wildflowers that are sourced of Irish provenance and grown in Ireland and so on. They're a different thing, and their function is different. So that will contain things again like cornflower, but native, oxeye daisy. It'll have loosestrife, knapweed, ragged robin, meadow buttercup, and lots of other native wildflowers. The benefit of native wildflowers is that they are not just aesthetically pleasing, they are very, very beneficial to insect life, which in turn is beneficial to bird life. The birds will come in to eat the insects off the meadow. It's also beneficial to bird life in terms of the seed heads. So the seed heads, for example, of knapweeds are, they're a haven for um, goldfinches and bullfinches and so on. You'll remember, anyone that's listened to the podcast for a long time, that when I put in the native wildflower meadow originally, I got bullfinches into the garden for the first time. So it's a totally different thing. And what you're doing is you're creating an ecosystem as opposed to producing a floral area. So they're slightly, they're not slightly different. They're very, very different in what they are. The floral meadow is going to be a short-term mix because even though it may have perennials in it, those perennials are not able to compete with, the likes of the local seeds, the grasses that might push into the meadow. They're not able to compete with those. So what will happen is you'll sow your meadow, you'll get a flush of annual flowers in year one, you'll get a flush of perennial flowers in year two, but by year three, those will have weakened quite a lot. And you'll certainly be re-sowing or redoing that area within, a year or two. Um, the native one is a longer term project. So when you sow that, what you're looking to do is you're looking to create something that's going to be there for a long, long time. Um, so it's important to know the difference between it. When it comes to a floral meadow can look kind of peak, that everyone knows that really high flowering look that you can get. And that will typically, you will see that look, you will have that look from, generally speaking, May, June, July, August, possibly into September. That's kind of the time frame. A native meadow will have different flowers that will come to the fore. It will look, you'll have some flowers in the early spring. You'll have the likes of the primrose, for example, in it now. The cowslip, they'll be in it now. And your later on, then you'll have your clovers, your plantains. Your in end of May into June, you'll have your oxeye daisies, which beautiful flower. Meadow buttercup, and so on. So the meadow will change and evolve, but it'll look that peak high color for only about 2 months of the year. And this is where, as a community group or within a state, you have to kind of navigate this, because when people picture wildflower meadow, they picture it in its peak, in its most vibrant, most flowering look. And whichever type of meadow you choose, it will not be that look all year round. In fact, the length of time that it's in that look is very, very limited. And for large parts of the year, that meadow can look, untidy to the, I suppose, the normal that you see in housing estates. So you have to change mindset a little bit. Now, if you have put in a floral meadow, when it doesn't look peak flowering, it's not very beneficial outside of, to biodiversity in general. Whereas the native meadow will be very, very beneficial to nature for large parts of the year. As I said, the seed heads, even when the seeds are or when the flowers have died off, the seed heads are beneficial to the birds. So you're creating an ecosystem for a longer period of time. So that's the two options. When it comes to establishing it, and again, this listener mentioned that the people were looking to put it in an area where it's it's a shaded area and it's not getting any traffic and it doesn't, so it's a kind of a hidden area basically. So in a way that becomes a kind of a token area, we're putting it here because it's not really in full view, um, and so on. But the other thing with that is that you're putting it into a shaded area, and some wildflowers won't be suited to a shaded area. So you just need to navigate that and make sure that you choose wildflowers that are suitable for a shaded area. The other thing is that when it is in a shaded area, you don't get to convey the message of, or it's when it's in a hidden area, you don't get to convey the message of this is a meadow that is supporting biodiversity, and that is why we've put it here. We know it doesn't look beautiful 12 months of the year, but we are benefiting nature and biodiversity by having it. So that's our purpose. Um, so if it's in an area that's hidden, you're less able to convey that message. And how you can convey that message in public spaces is the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. If you look it up, you land on their website. They will they will have a section where you click in as a community organization, whether that's a sports club or a housing estate or a school or a community center or whatever it is, whatever type of organization you have. You can click through and you can get lots of information there for a start, but you can also request signage. And this is a vital piece of establishing a meadow, because as I say, this meadow is not going to look gorgeous for 12 months of the year. So you need to be able to tell the story and convey the message as to what is happening here. Otherwise, you will have the people driving in and out within the community group, and they'll be saying, look at the state of that area, it looks horrible. And on the face of it versus, a peak meadow or versus, what people have perceived to be tidy, mowed tight, clean cut areas. On the face of it, it can look untidy. And then so people only see the untidiness if you don't convey the message properly. So when conveying the message, you can, as I say, request this signage from the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. They also have things that you can circulate around the group. So if you have, a housing estate and there's a housing committee and there's a WhatsApp group or there's an email group for everybody who potentially will be in that estate, then you're able to share this information. You're going to be able to say that, listen, we're sowing this meadow for the benefit of biodiversity. We know that it's going to look superb for 4 months of the year. And we know that for other months of the year, it's going to be less beneficial. But let's look at September, where there's not much flower in it, or October, where there's not much flower in it. What's happening at this time of the year is that it's going to be attracting in goldfinches, which are really, really beneficial. So you can put up this signage. This area is being managed for biodiversity under the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. You can circulate the information that tells people, what to expect. So they know that, right, this meadow is not going to look peak flower in September and October. But while it doesn't look peak flower, we have loads of goldfinches in, which we normally don't do. And it's beneficial to the biodiversity, on a larger scale. So you're conveying that message and you're explaining that message. And now people have an understanding. So now when they drive by, they don't see untidiness. What they see is a haven for biodiversity, food for the birds, food for the pollinators, stems which are homes for other insects. And it becomes a different conversation. So it's really, really important to navigate that part of the decision, is to inform people, and then during the process continue to inform people as to what is happening. As I say, it's the most common mistake is that people think of a wildflower meadow and can only visualize it. When you talk about wildflower meadow, they can only visualize that peak period. And that peak period is a small enough window across a 12-month year. So you have to inform people and let them know what to expect over the rest of the year. Now there is ways to improve the look of it, from a look perspective. So from my meadow, for example, I have a lot of bulbs gone in. So a lot of bluebells flower in there. They look brilliant in the early part of the year. I have a lot of snowdrops gone in there. Again, a lot of flower, crocuses. So there's 400 or 500 yellow crocuses in there. They give beautiful color early in the time. The daffodils I've gone in only in the last year, really. I've added daffodils into it, and they're given color at certain times of the year. Now at the moment, the Camassias, which I've put a lot of in, they're all coming up. They're going to flower and they can compete very, very well in a meadow. And now what you have is you have extended periods of flower all the time, keeping your signage up, informing people of what's happening and so on. Another good thing to do is to engage with the people. If it's in a housing estate, engage with the homeowners to say, we're doing a wildflower walk or talk at the meadow on Saturday morning for an hour. Have a cup of tea and coffee. Explain what's happening. Explain what's in the meadow at that time, and do that a couple of times of the year. And now you're again engaging them, explaining to them that this is what's happening. It doesn't look peak, but this is what the benefit is, um, beyond what you would see aesthetically. So it's all about information. It's all about information, and there is, as I say, through the All Ireland Pollinator, there is ways to navigate that. Um, Whichever meadow you decide to go with, then choose the location and then choose the seed to match that. So if it's in a really shaded, wet area, then you have to be very, very specific about what you would put in there, because not, as this listener mentioned, they were going to go to the local discount store and buy wildflower seeds. If you put that in a really wet, shaded area, it will not grow. These are cultivated flowers. They like the best of conditions and they won't grow in there. Whereas if you go and choose a proper native Irish wildflower mix from somebody like Sandra Cafola, who's, producer of wildflower seeds, he will give you specific seeds that's suitable for that area, and they will thrive and grow a lot better. But whichever seed you choose, how you start a meadow is exactly the same. So whether it's a flower meadow or a native meadow, you start with essentially bare ground. So, and there's loads of ways to do that. You can do it through sod removal. You can do it through stale seed beds. You can do it through using the likes of yellow rattle. Um, Generally speaking, in housing estates, the use of chemicals isn't allowed, but you could, if you wanted to, use chemicals to clear off an area first and then put your wildflowers in. That is an option. Not recommending that personally, but that is an option. And the other thing that may be an option is that the All Ireland Pollinator Plan really, promote and advertise the principle of no mow May. So no mow, let it grow, essentially. So allow a meadow to form from a grass area. And I've mentioned on the podcast several times before, that is a good way of doing it, but that will only work if the area hasn't been kept pristine, as a pristine grass area previously. And by a pristine grass area, I mean if something hasn't been used to kill what would be called weeds within grasses. So if you've been treating a lawn area for weeds, then a lot of those natural seeds that would be there are not there. So you end up growing just grass, and that's not a good way to start a meadow. However, if it's an area that hasn't been actively managed and there is a natural seed bed there that contains, a lot of, killias, plantains, things like that, then you can, just by stopping mowing, develop a meadow. Now it won't look your picture postcard meadow. It just won't. But you will get some flower in it. You will get maybe the likes of clovers popping through, and certain things like plantains, achilles, things like that, that can be naturally there in the soil, and they, because you stop mowing, get the chance to develop. Dandelions will almost certainly be there, clovers, as I mentioned, and some of those. So no mow, let it grow is, as I said, the principle of the all-Ireland pollinator plan, but it only works if the seed bed that's there is already, full of seed, just waiting to develop into plants. Yellow rattle then can be used to reduce grasses, ineffective against scotch grass, but can be used to keep out grasses. But the principle of it, whichever meadow you're doing, whether it's floral meadows or wildflower meadows, the principle is that you are starting from a weed-free bed. You have to be weed-free at the starting point. So that's kind of covering the first things. It's very much about public, making everybody aware of what to expect. Um, then you choose the type of meadow. I personally would be recommending, a native wildflower meadow because that's a long-term meadow and has much, much better benefits for biodiversity in general. Uh, Over a floral meadow, that's what I'd be recommending. And whichever one you start with, you can establish by just stopping mowing, but you do need to have a certain level of plant diversity in that seed bed anyway, or you need to start with, complete vegetation removal and then sow in your mix into that. So they're the options. Um, a note now from this week's sponsor. It's Seeds Ireland, and yeah, we're in April. It's a brilliant time to be sowing seed. Next week's episode is all about what we can sow in the month of May. But Seeds Ireland, I've used them a good few times. They have five-star reviews on both Google and Trustpilot. They have really high germination rates in their seed. So anytime I've sowed their seed, I've never had any issue around germination. So they've always been very, very good. Very good range, large range of different types of seed. They come really quickly. So even last week, I got some seed ahead of the Grow Your Own Herbal Medicine workshop and ordered them on the Wednesday of last week, which was too late. I know I should have had it done ages, but ordered on the Wednesday, got it on the Thursday. One variety which wasn't available on the Thursday was sent on the Friday, and I got it here for the workshop on the Saturday. So superb service and very, very fast delivery. It's the time to sow seeds anyway, and there's a huge range to choose from. Delivery is very, very quick, as I said, anywhere in Ireland. And we have a listener's offer on it. So I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's seedireland.ie/master. And there's a listener offer there where you get, I think it's 10% off any orders placed through that link. So a link is in the show notes, but if anyone is looking for seeds, check out Seeds Ireland. As I say, a very, very good company. Now that you've chosen your wildflower meadow, and the native wildflower meadow, as I say, is the one that I would choose. And the reasons I would choose it is it's a long-term meadow, so you're getting a lot of long-term benefit. It's locally sourced Irish provenance seed that is important for biodiversity. And then the benefits to biodiversity go beyond pollinators. So they, as I said, bees, insects, birds, lots of different biodiversity is, you create an ecosystem as opposed to a meadow. And yeah, there is a couple of suppliers, but the best is Sandro Caffola. He has so much knowledge in wildflowers, and yeah, he's grown wildflowers for 30 years in Ireland, and anyone else that's grown them has kind of learned from him. So it's well worth doing. What to expect from your meadow going forward then, and this is again part of the education process. You will get in year one, you'll get your annuals flowering, you will get your perennials will germinate, but they won't flower necessarily in year one. So your mix and your colors and your flower will change from year one to two and even into year three because you get biennials and you get your shorter term perennials that will flower in year two and year three. But after that, the mix changes again. And definitely something I've noticed. So originally there would have been quite a bit of, there would have been poppies in it and, various types of annuals. Then year two was heavily dominated by oxeye daisies and some other stuff. But last year, the explosion of ragged robin, for example, was amazing. Just a really beautiful. It was just a sea of pink at one stage, then followed by a sea of white of oxeye. Knapweed was very prominent in it. But through all of those years, what has been really evident is how much life is in the meadow. And again, this is really, really important in terms of communicating this message to anybody that would have or should have an interest in this. So within a housing estate development, like you do need to kind of tell everybody what's happening so that people don't view it then as untidy or whatever. They're viewing it through this perspective of this is a wildflower area and we're managing it for biodiversity. Engage the children in that process as well, because yeah, a proper Irish wildflower meadow, when you walk through that, even when it's not flowering, like all the insects and birds or all the insects will rise off that meadow as you walk through it. And it can be a really, it's a really grounding type of experience. Get to know what's in there, get to know the wildflowers, um, create a kind of an education piece around that and engage everybody in the process. Now, if when it comes to ID, some very, very good books. There's a brilliant one by Zoe Devlin, The Wildflowers of Ireland, which basically is a brilliant book for identifying what wildflowers are in it. And if you are going to be educating people on it, that's a good one to have because down the spine of the book is color coded. So white is white flowers, yellow is yellow flowers, pink is pink flowers, and you just open up the pages. You can see the colors down the side. So you can, if you know you have a yellow flower, you're not sure what it is, you go to the yellow section, you open it up, and then from there you can narrow it down to choose the type of wildflower that you have. And again, the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, they would have individual kind of postcards with this is a picture of an oxeye daisy, this is a picture of a you know, buttercup or a clover, and they have these information cards that you can put there so that when people are standing there and they're looking at this meadow, you're able to give them that information at a glance as to what it is. Um, they're kind of the main points when it comes to sowing time. So this listener has messaged this week. When it comes to sowing time, the very, very best time of the year for a native wildflower meadow is September. The second best time of the year is May. So either one of them is a really good time to sow the seed. The fact that we're in almost in May now, and you're not prepped, as in you're not weed free in that area, then maybe September is the best window. I know that this group haven't chosen their location yet, and there is, kind of meetings or walks around the estate to try and figure out where things are going. So they're at that stage yet. So looking at it, potentially you wouldn't be ready for May to be weed free because you do need to be weed free at the start, or vegetation free rather than weed free. Get pulled up on that terminology there. But so vegetation free when you're starting. Another possibility is because you're bridging people's expectations of what an area should look like. And I've seen it done in some places where what they start with is wherever there's trees planted, they create, a 2 or 3 meter diameter circular area around each tree that they decide we're not going to mow this, we're not going to spray this, but what we're going to do is we're going to put flower in it. And they can start off by adding some bulbs, adding some wildflowers, and you just let that area become your smaller pockets of wildflower. And what ends up happening then is you're still benefiting, biodiversity by creating these little pockets. Whoever's mowing the grass is going to have it a little bit easier because you're not having to go in and around trees. You create a flower area. It looks pretty, but it's not on a huge scale. So people have the time to acclimatize to it, as opposed to if you mark out a big area and you go for it straight away, and you can get resistance. But starting smaller around trees is a good way to sort of bridge that gap, or a good starting point. And you will find that if you do it properly, put in your bulbs, put in your wildflowers, start off vegetation free under those trees, you will find that it will look good. The benefit to biodiversity will be clear and evident. Again, put your posters up. And now people are saying, oh yeah, I can see what they're talking about here. I can see all the flower in May, June, July. I can see the insects on it, I can see the birds on it. Now it would make sense for us to, increase the area and go for a bigger area. So bring people on you on the journey with you. That's my advice. That's my advice is that, you have obviously you have an understanding of what it is that you're looking to achieve. You have an understanding of what a wildflower meadow is, what it can look like, what benefits it has. But not everybody has that same understanding now. So what you need to do is sort of navigate that and bring them along that information piece with you. Share this podcast with them is a good way as well because it'll kind of explain it, and explain and sort of manage expectations around wildflower meadows because they are beautiful for about 4 months of the year, 3, 4 months of the year, and then they're a haven for biodiversity out from that. The floral meadows are beautiful for 4 months of the year. They're very short term, and you're going to end up doing it again and again if you want to keep that look. And you know, you're as I say, managing people's expectations and informing them every step of the journey. Um, some questions then around wildflowers and kind of the main ones. What can you do to make the meadow look well at the times of the year where it isn't pink flower? Well, I mentioned some of those. You can add bulbs to them. That's a big one. Um, it's still going to be tricky to have color all year round, but you can certainly add bulbs that'll give you that lovely spring color. That's one way of doing it. How to cut the meadows is another one that comes up a lot. So depending on the type of meadow, a native wildflower meadow, generally speaking, wants to be cut once a year, ideally in September time. And as well as that, you need to take away those clippings. So you cut them in September time, you take that away, and you try and reduce the fertility in that area. So again, that's an important point when it comes to, housing estates. Where are you going to take this material when it's taken away? Um, so that's something just to consider, especially if it's a big area. That's why starting maybe with the area around trees can be a good starting point or smaller areas. Um, how do you cut the meadow? Basically, there's lots of ways, but you're talking about a blade on a strimmer head or something like that. You want to cut it down to about 2 inches from the ground. A lot of it will be long, likes of oxeye daisies could be 2.5, 3 foot tall, and they'll be woody at that stage of the year. So there's a little bit of work in cutting it, but you do need to do that for the benefit of the meadow going forward. If you don't cut it, the meadow will fade out fairly quickly. So it's really important that you do cut the meadow. Um, Not every mix is the same as well. As I mentioned, if you go to your local discount store and you buy a mix, it could have a picture on the front that shows you this beautiful garden, but that's going to be in really peak condition. And it's also going to be for year one, maybe year two, maximum year three, and then you start the process again. So you start with vegetation free again, and off you go again. So just be aware of those things. But the biggest advice I could give to this listener is to bring everybody on the journey with you, to explain what it is that you're looking to achieve from it, explain the benefits, the broader benefits, the the information, what it does, why it does this, why it looks this way at certain times of the year, even when it looks, untidy through the normal prism that we have got used to looking at areas from. Even when it looks tidy, these benefits are still there. And as I said, there's ways of doing that by having wildflower walks, um, definitely utilizing the signage and the information from the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. And yeah, all of those are really beneficial. Children will love that as well if you're able to engage them in the process because there'll be things like butterflies, hopefully, on it. All the different bees will be there. And so you can create an ID quizzes and different things like that. So there's ways of engaging people and creating an awareness. And now, after a little period of time, that awareness can grow. So it's not just you who's driving this thing now. You have others within the wider group, and they see the benefits. They understand what's happening, and then you're able to grow more and do more and have more momentum within the group if the for the drive to help pollinators reduce mowing or whatever the overall goal is. Some people in every area, in every group like this, won't care in the slightest. They'll drive in and out by it. They won't notice that it looks good. They won't notice it when it looks untidy. They just won't care. Then there'll be people who are passionate about looking to support biodiversity, passionate about all those things. And then there'll be people who, want the thing to look well. And when it doesn't look well, they're not happy. But again, it's about bridging that information gap so that you're informing people on every step of the journey. So hopefully that has helped you. Timing wise, because I know that was one of the main concerns, was timing wise, May and September, the two best months. Given that it's almost May, I would be thinking now you either start with really small areas around trees or you have a longer term look ahead to a sowing in September and just get that whole information piece, be totally ready in that your whatever area you're going to do is vegetation free by then. September is also a brilliant time because it's the time when all your bulbs will be available. They can go in at the same time. So now going into next year, you're really well set up. So best of luck with it. It does, it is an information piece. You are trying to, I would say, at the start of it, you're trying to convince people, but convince them by informing them properly and letting them know that this is what we can expect. We can expect 4 months of really great flower here. We can expect 10 months of huge support for biodiversity in the area. We can reduce our mowing by X amount. We can teach our children that, this is these untidy, through the normal prism of looking at things, these untidy areas are hugely beneficial. They're very, very important for biodiversity. And, build that information, build that community buy-in, because otherwise what ends up happening is you become the wacky person who um, wants to grow this mad area in the corner and you don't get the buy-in. You need that buy-in from everybody or else it'll just fall by the wayside. And that buy-in comes through conveying a message with knowledge and with clear information as to what is happening and why it's happening. But the best of luck with it, and it's something that all community groups should, and more of them are doing it. It's becoming more and more popular. But it is hugely important. That information piece is hugely important in that journey from concept idea to functioning wildflower meadow 2, 3 years down the line from now. So best of luck with it. I hope you get everybody involved. I hope you get everybody bought in, and I hope this podcast has given you the information to inform, the people in your circle. If you have any further questions on it, don't be afraid to let me know. Before we finish off, huge thanks again to this week's sponsors. It's Probio Carbon and Seeds Ireland. Uh, Links to both of those companies are in the show notes. Listener offer on Seeds Ireland. And next week's episode will fall right in tune with Seeds Ireland's product range. It's what to sow in the month of May, flowers and vegetables and herbs. So we'll be looking at the whole grouping of sowing for the month of May. But that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, happy gardening.